It's common to port or reuse levels from older games in the Sonic modding community, but it can feel out of place depending on which game you're modding. For example, it'd be cool if we could play Lava Shelter in Sonic Frontiers, but it's fairly out of place for the theme and tone of that game. Frontiers is an open-world adventure focusing on the immediate cast in a giant grassland. Of course, that doesn't really matter at the end of the day as long as you're playing some cool hedgehog video games, but it's something that I think about from time to time. This is mainly an immersion thing for me, but there are some cases where I don't play level ports because the feel of the level design in that game just doesn't work for the physics of something like Frontiers or Unleashed. I'm not criticizing anyone's creative ambition here, go and make what you want. I just have a personal preference for this kind of thing. And that being said, I've always felt that Generations was the perfect game for this kind of thing. This game is already extremely moddable and replayable as is, but by pure chance, the theme of this game makes perfect sense when you're playing levels from the past and the future. Anything goes in Generations, it's not just time travel, it's also universes apparently. Again, this is a really specific thing to point out, but it's just something I've always appreciated about Generations modding specifically. In other Sonic games, you'll see ports just like this because it's what the community does. We put games from that game into this game. But I don't really think something like Sunset Heights, for example, fits in Sonic Lost World, you know? Sometimes it's best if those games are self-contained or the custom content sticks to the theme of the game. But when Sonic revisits Wave Ocean, Grand Metropolis, or Splash Hill, it makes complete sense. And the best part is that it doesn't matter if it's modern Sonic, classic Sonic, or a custom character, because all of them are technically a part of this game too. And that's just one of the many reasons I find it awesome that Sega revisited this game and gave us an entire new story. Shadow Generations does a phenomenal job at utilizing time travel, as we glimpse tomorrow as much as yesterday. Thanks for that fire line, Gerald. Like, I already had no issue with using the custom Shadow character mod in Sonic Generations because yeah, he was present during the White Space incident, but now we actually get proper context of what he was doing during that, so it incentivizes us to do more custom levels and explore different possibilities. It's funny because we could feasibly see classic Sonic running around Westopolis and Shadow running around Flying Battery if they simply found each other's hub worlds. There's no reason at all to question why Shadow would be there. It's really neat. And one of those very specific examples is something we're playing here today, the Flying Battery level mod for Shadow himself. This is a really fun mod because it was made in the Blendhog level creator done in Blender, so pretty much all of this terrain was built in a 3D modeling program, and I love it because you get stuff like this, like a half pipe, something that Shadow can use his sidestep mechanic to slide upwards through, like it's a ramp. Through here, you can use a quick-stepping section just like Sonic Generations, except with Shadow-specific mechanics. It's really cool. Also, I love that Shadow is a more combat-oriented hedgehog, but he can defeat these enemies with just a regular jump ball like Sonic can. But this level really shines in how it utilizes the transformed terrain and how different surfaces work in Shadow Generations and Sonic Frontiers. There's lots of sections in those games where you can utilize shifting terrain to run on walls or to go through loops and stuff. A lot of that kind of stuff here isn't automated. And I really appreciate these really basic platforms here. I don't know why, it's just really fun to remember that this level comes from a 2D platforming game and you get really simple sections like that. But because this is also a 3D game, you get open spaces like this with like 4 different branching paths and possible ways to go. It's really fun. This level design right here is super simple but very fun. You're just slightly out of the way of these orange rings and then you double jump to tap yourself in like you're playing golf. This part's really neat too, because look at like the decoration here, dude, like the support beams, and the fact that we could just use the momentum off that ramp intentionally to put ourselves in position to get onto that other ramp. And another thing that should be commended is the custom cameras in this level. Custom cameras can be very tricky to set up in Shadow Generations. And this part is an entirely alternate route, by the way. That's another thing that's really sick about this level. Between all of the shifting terrain that lets you like shoot yourself off of ramps and all the twisting, turning loops everywhere, you actually get to explore a lot of different alternate routes just like a classic level. That's actually something that Shadow Generations doesn't really do a whole lot in the base game. There are branching pathways, but not quite to the degree of this. I also think it's really neat. Again, we're kind of combining like that egg-fully imagery from Sonic Heroes with Sonic 3's Air Arsenal aesthetic. Like, seeing all of these Sonic 3 sprites plastered into a 3D environment while still having that retro feel is really sick. It actually reminds me of the Jakks Pacific Flying Battery diorama set, where it's all in 3D, but every single texture is utilizing an actual in-game sprite from Sonic 3. So that's another thing that I really like about this mod's visual look. Like, it can be challenging to make these levels look visually appealing because you're limited to basically just the objects that come in base Shadow generations. You don't really get to make a whole lot of custom stuff yourself. And like I said, it's really brilliant that they utilize all the shifting gravity in this level, because you get really cool sections like this where you're running on walls, and if you're clever enough, you can just mess around with the gravity to try and skip it, but here I kind of got stuck for a second, and then I don't know what happened in that gravity automation, but I was able to make it back, baby, no problem. But like, look at this, I'm running down a ship, and then I shift the perspective by going to the right. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I was really hoping to see more of after Final Horizon in this game, but we didn't really get a lot of that. So, of course, it's up to the players themselves that play a ton of these games to normalize that kind of level design with these physics. Like, there's just so many different slopes where the level creator intentionally wants you to shoot yourself upwards. It's really sick. And unfortunately, that is the end of this level. I kind of, like, found a perfect route for speedrunning, and I wanted to show that off first and foremost, but I also do want to show off some alternate pathways here. I really love the color of that fleet in the background. That's so cool. Again, it's that mishmash of modern aesthetic with classic aesthetic. All at the same time, we could have seen Sonic 3 from a 3D perspective had that game come out in a different time, so I appreciate stuff like this. On to Run 2 of this level. Something that I want to point out is that while the shifting terrain is really cool, it is very easy for you to accidentally shoot yourself off the side of that ramp there instead of going directly up the middle. There's not a lot of automation in this level, which to some degree that's a good thing, because I can have a lot of fun shooting myself off of pathways just like I want, but in other ways it's just a little bit difficult to aim yourself. The only reason that I made this level look as smooth as I did was because I played it so much and understood exactly what the level creator wanted me to do. But I imagine that a lot of people who play this level for the first time are probably gonna mess up a lot. Like in this section here, I did not initially realize that you were supposed to run on the side of the wall here, because I kept falling, and I thought this part was just broken or something. So that's a good example of how this level could have improved. Down here, you have another section where it specifically wants you to run alongside the wall, even though it's a very short section. They have all these little side routes and tiny rooms here, in case that you can't keep up with the level design and stay on the top route. This part reminds me a lot of Dream Team, where there's like so many different possible pathways you can go through in this wide open space. Like, it's so cool. You could just hold your diagonal sidestep to go alongside that diagonal platform there. And just like Dream Team, again, you could just run on this slope and start riding on the wall, and then you can avoid the lasers in a completely different way. Also, I want to show off that you can actually jump on top of these support beams. Like, the decorative parts of this level were not necessary, because people are going to be speeding through all of this geometry, but like, even look at that, like, you get the diagonally slanted, like, support beams on the side of the wall. You get this purple section on the inside of the ship here, which is honestly very accurate to the original Flying Battery because there were inside sections. But this part's really cool. You can just manually run through this loop with no automation at all. That feels so much better than having a automated camera POV, in my opinion. The fact that these levels are created in Blender makes for some really interesting decoration, because there are these support beams at top here that have no actual function, but you can jump around on them. And that's just very immersive. I have nothing else to say, I just really like that that's in there. And I really like the utilization of different robots in this level too. You have some from 06, you have some from Heroes, you have some from Gun. Now, I don't know why Gun is here necessarily, but I guess you could headcanon that they're trying to infiltrate the Flying Battery or something. I don't know. That's the fun part about fan content in Generations, is that it could just be anything at any point in time. I also really enjoy that if you take a moment to free cam this level, the actual outside look of it is very accurate to Sonic 3. You have these cylindrical pillars going up and down, and there's actual parts of level design that are built on top of the ships, like you would do in the original Flying Battery. Like, yes, this level does have some very rough edges when it comes to shifting the gravity and the transforming terrain and how that can interact with the player's first-time experience, but man, it is so neat. Like, look at this. I could just go back to this other route and find these guys, or I could choose to not go up this ramp here, and I can go on a completely alternate route. If you decide to stick back here, there's a bunch of extra rings hanging out for you over here. And the level creator also decorated these support beams with the laser obstacle that is in Shadow Generations. There is so much thought put into every tiny corner of this level. Just because you could speed by it really quickly, or because some of the physics are a little bit unfriendly for new players, does not necessarily mean that this level should be ignored because it isn't as polished as others. When it comes to aesthetics, this is probably my favorite Shadow Generations custom level, and probably will be for a very long time, unless, I guess, someone makes something like this again. And I, quite frankly, believe that Shadow really fits in the environment of Flying Battery, as opposed to, like, some random zone on Angel Island, because this is a more industrial, modernized zone, you know? It's inherently linked to humans in some way, because only humans build battleships like this. So it's really neat watching Shadow storm a very classic version of one of Eggman's bases, even though this environment is technically for classic Sonic. And this level genuinely has a lot of really good opportunities for you to slow down and just look around in a full 360 environment, like again, like that section that had a bunch of those super rings on top of that pillar. It feels like a proper 3D platformer, as opposed to just running down a linear hallway route. And again, like I was saying, if you look in the distance here, you can see all of the branching paths, the rails, the different platforms that are hanging off of these ships in the sky. It's built like the actual visual look of the original Flying Battery, and on top of it, again, you have the more modern warships, like I was saying. It really puts into perspective the scale of Eggman's creations. But long story short, I'm just trying to say that Generations is a very immersive game for the modding community because everything goes, and it makes total sense that I might see Shadow revisit an environment that he wasn't even in. I mean, hell, he was in Chaos Island and Frontiers, and ironically, that's the level that Flying Battery goes over. It's really cool because this is also giving us a look at if Flying Battery ever returned in a modern game as well. It gives us a look at different kinds of characters interacting in environments they haven't been in before. And recontextualizing the scale of a classic level in a 3D environment shows you just how impressive some of the in-game feats of these characters are. And on top of it all, this level design is just a clear evolution of what they were doing in Final Horizon, with all of this funky terrain stuff. I think if you're a hardcore grinder of the modern games, you're really going to get a lot of replayability out of this level. This is the mod creator's first attempt at a level, so I understand why it's flawed in some ways, but they honestly don't really bother me. If anything, I'm just floored that I can run on walls so casually. Also, yeah, I recorded this on an airplane. You should have expected that at this point. I like to cover platforming content, both fan-made and official, and if you like what you saw here today, consider checking out my Sonic modding playlist, as I have many others just like this.